Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Natalie, and we have the lovely Pippa with us today.
Hi everybody.
Okay, so we were going to talk about parties because we're aware that as presenters, lots of us struggle doing parties, whether they be online or at home. So we're going to focus today mainly on online parties. Pippa is our online party queen. Um,
Not sure I'd go
so
that far.
well, so we're going to Pippa's going to go through some hints and tips of what's worked for her over the last few months, and hopefully plant some seeds for you for ideas to get you going. What Pippa's going to give you isn't necessarily something for you to exactly mirror image and copy. It's just to give you some ideas. There's things that Pippa's going to do that I might not do because they might not work for me. There's going to be things that I do that maybe Pippa doesn't do. So it's about building what works for you. Okay, so Pippa, how do you start by setting up your parties and things?
Okay, so when I first started, I watched lots of training videos, and most of them came from America. And so it made me realize quite quickly that lots of the things that they do don't necessarily work for us because we've got a very different audience. So really, how I started getting my parties in the beginning was in kind of an apologetic way. I would message people and ask if they'd be a guinea pig for me. I'd starting this new format with parties. Would they help me out? And most of them said yes because they were doing me a favor rather than me trying to push it onto them, if you like. So that was the way I managed to get my first few parties at the beginning, which obviously then leads to more parties because people are in the group then and you offer parties to them, and if they go well then they want one too. So it worked quite well for me in the beginning. Now how I tend to get parties, anyone who inquires at all about our products, I'll ask them if they want a party. So I'll give them the price and I'll say, or if you like, we can have a party and you can hopefully win some goodies for free. And normally, I would say 8 times out of 10, they take that up. So that worked quite well.
Do you stick with using the phrase party? Because I know from watching various training videos, some people steer away from using the term party
Mm.
because they feel that sometimes can put people off accepting because they feel like they might have it's too cliche almost.
I don't call them parties on the actual event. I call them what do I call them? A unique online experience.
Yeah,
So I
that's
don't.
what I do.
Oh, is it?
That yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I call mine. Just because it's, I think if it's more of an experience, it's, I think you're kind of taking that pressure off it being something that you have to sell to. Because I definitely find if you go to somebody's home party, for example, and you have all this beautiful stuff in front of you, and you've listened for a couple of hours to somebody um, sharing what they like about all these lovely things, you kind of do feel a bit pressured into buying something, whether you want it or not.
Mm.
So I think I definitely agree by taking that word almost party out of it, by making it experience. It means you're sharing something with them
Mm-hmm.
rather than putting that sale on. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm not very good at home parties. I get really nervous. So I definitely know that feeling. And if somebody asked me to have a party, I'll say no, thank you.
Yeah.
So I try and explain to them that they don't have to do an awful lot. You know, it's not lots of pressure on them. All they need to do is invite their friends and family, and I'll kind of do the rest. If they can pop a picture on, if they've got some products themselves, or comments here and there, brilliant. But I do try and take the pressure off them completely. So some of the things I come up against with excuses, because I think that's the other thing. People get these
Yeah.
excuses. And honestly, I think it all depends on the timing when you catch them. I think anybody would have a party if you catch them at the right time. So I
Okay.
think we need to think about when we're messaging people, particularly, if it's people that are perhaps mums, and you're catching them at the end of the day when they're absolutely shattered, the last thing they're going to want is to agree to a party. So I just think there needs to be a kind of a thought process, or that's how what I find as when you're going to be messaging.
I
Um,
think that's a really good, a really good point, and probably actually something I've not really thought too
mm,
much about. But yeah, I mean, and that's where kind of knowing your existing customer base comes in, and obviously if you're quite new, it's knowing your friends.
mm,
Think I do a lot of my unique business as such through thinking about how would I like it.
mm,
Like how
yeah.
would I like somebody to message me? How would I like to be shown the products? So I think when you're reaching out to somebody to potentially question whether they would be happy to host a party for you online, I think it's really important to think about how you would like to be messaged. Do you just want a spammy message saying, "Hey, do you want free stuff? Do this and we'll get it." Because that's not personal. I blatantly would never ever even reply to that message.
No, and I don't think again, I think that comes down to a very British thing. I think any random requests, I mean, I've had them and they just grate on me. If it's very much, it's that. What I would try and do is build up a bit of a relationship with somebody first. So we'll chat for a few days, or even a couple of weeks. It's worth biding your time, I think, before you go straight in, bam, with a party, because it doesn't feel like you've kind of been railroaded into it.
More natural.
Yeah, it does, and I prefer that too.
Yeah.
It's better with me, and I think it probably would with lots of people.
Yeah.
And the whole spammy thing, it just gives us all a bad name.
Yeah.
Personally, I think, so I don't like it.
No, I agree. Okay, so once you've managed to get somebody to agree to a unique experience, so you would go ahead and, how do you do your parties? Do you do groups, events, or what do you normally do?
Okay, if it's a customer party, then I do it as a group. I have found, because I do mystery hostess parties as well within my own group, and I find events work better. So it's really interesting how it goes. I don't know which one I'd suggest. I think it's a case of trial and error. Some work better for others. The events, people have to accept your invitation. The groups, they're just there.
Do you find them smaller? So say if an event that you do as a party that you do as an event, do you find that the attendance number tends to be a little bit smaller, like your audience?
It will be, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I was about to say, I think that for me that would be a good thing, because I think the people that are in there are there for a reason, because they're actually interested, rather than just added for added sakes.
That's right. And there's also, if you've got like a really big group, and half of them aren't interested, then they could be half of the people that are seeing the posts. So you're actually losing some of your good audience to a bad audience just for a case of numbers. Actually, some of my smaller parties have been the best ones. So it isn't all about the numbers, I don't think, anyway.
No. Okay, so say if we go through an event type one.
Okay.
So you've set up your event. Do you add information in before you add your hostess in, or do you sort of do it and then you sort of add bits in?
Okay, so I will always make sure I know what my party is going to be exactly down to every single post before I even send a message to someone, because what I've found is if they say yes, you want them to set that party up, event up ASAP. So I want it to be able to go from the minute they say yes, they'll have one. So I plan it all in advance. And yeah, this is advice from somebody else with regards to putting the welcome video in as soon as they've been added. So I still do that, and that works really, really well. More people see it. It was suggested to do lots of silly dancing for the welcome video. To me, that's not me. So if I did that, I would feel so out of my comfort zone that it wouldn't work.
Have you seen my welcome video?
Well, I didn't want to say anything about your welcome video. But it works.
There's no dancing at all, I'm sure.
It does work. I'm sure it works. But for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I think it would show. And I think to me, the best tip I can probably give is just to be as natural in yourself as possible, because if you're not, it'll show. People will see that you look uncomfortable, and they'll feel uncomfortable watching it. I can assure you, if I was dancing on screen, everyone would feel really uncomfortable.
I think maybe we should see some just to see.
No, you're all right.
No, I think that's a good idea. I think I think the key thing from that point is to make sure is that you're prepared. There's a saying that I do say quite a lot. Some of you may have heard that is the failing to plan is planning to fail, and I can't stress that enough. If you've suddenly, like, you're on this mission of I'm gonna start parties and I'm gonna message everyone I know, and you do happen to get maybe 3 people say yes they're doing, what do you do then?
Yeah, and what I tend to
be prepared.
I tend to only message as I'm working through my list, I'll message 20 people at a time, because if they don't, but if they were all to reply, I want to know that I've got the time to speak to them individually without copy and pasting, and feeling stressed, because again, that comes across Well, I know when I'm really rushed, my messages that I send do come across as rushed. So I do that. Then I'll wait for those to either reply. I've got lists. So I've got a yes list, a no list, a no thanks, no thanks. Haven't got the friends. That's one as well. I haven't got enough friends that would buy. So what I do is when I get reply or an ignore, the ignore list is the biggest one. So but I'll go back to them. So I then transfer them from that list onto these new lists. So then the lists are constantly revolving, if that makes sense. And where was I going with that?
We were just sort of saying, so it's about being prepared and making sure. So you've messaged people. Do you tend to theme your parties, or do you have like a blanket formula that you use for pretty much every single party, or do you tweak them and change them? Or
I tweak mine almost every time I do a set. So if say I'm doing 5 in a week, I'll do all those 5 the same, but then the next week there'll be something slightly different, mainly because my videos don't upload after they've been around for a while, so I have an awful problem with my videos. But for me, the welcome video, I like to personalize it.
Okay, so you make an individual one for every single party.
Yeah, so I mean, say the welcome video is a minute long and you've got 10 parties going, that's 10 minutes of your time. So to me, it doesn't feel like it's much time to give up.
No.
And that
it makes it personal, yeah.
Definitely. And with the welcome video as well, one thing I think is you've got to be wearing makeup. You've got to be wearing the makeup that you're trying to sell. And personally, I try and go as natural as possible, because I think unless you've got the real makeup lovers, if you've gone really strong and bright with the makeup, it will put them off first of all. They'll think, oh, this isn't for me. Does that make sense?
No, I completely agree. Again, it's knowing. I think a degree comes down to knowing the people that you're aiming it for. Like clearly somebody like me, if you were to do a welcome video and I was in that party and you were literally chiseled and literally framed to a T, I instantly would be like, these products aren't for me, because I can't do that.
Yeah, it's intimidating, I think.
So just be, obviously, if you're somebody that wears quite heavy makeup and that's naturally you, then I think that's fine, because you will naturally sit comfortable in that look. I think it's about, in any of your videos, you're right, it's about being you. And I am quite a bubbly, fun, silly kind of person, so most people would expect my personality of that trait to come out in my videos, which they do come out as quite, says I can't do serious makeup tutorial videos, because that's just not me. Whereas some people are very good at doing that, and that's amazing. They're bringing some amazing skills. So I think it puts a lot of people off doing parties is that they have such a high expectation of themselves that they have to do X, Y, and Z and produce all these tutorial videos, produce all these funny videos, you don't. You just, I tend to focus on, I don't cover obviously every single product. I have between maybe 5 or 6 products generally that I focus on. And some of them I do more heavily than others, because they might tend to be my favourite products. So they're things that I can be a bit more passionate about. I think if you if I don't really wear blusher because I'm quite red, and I don't need any more red in my life. So for me, blusher wouldn't be something I could probably be that passionate about. So I'm not to say I wouldn't necessarily do a post, but it wouldn't be my best post of the group. So I think it's to not think, right, okay, so I've got to do 50 videos in a week, because nobody's going to sit there and watch every single product video. So do you tend to have do you focus on a set group, or do you do a bit of everything? Or
so I tend to do my parties over 5 days, because I think 10 days is just too long. Sometimes even 3 days works, because you've got their attention, and it's a shorter span to do it. Yeah, and I pick about 5 products to do. But what I do on the first day is I pop a link to my flipbook catalogue. So I just say, I'll be showing you my favourites, but if there's anything that you want to know about, then let me know, and we can include it, because I want it to feel like it's their party. And nearly always somebody wants something that I haven't shown them, because I don't tend to show perhaps the foundations quite as much as some of the other products, and that's actually what they all want to know about. And that's good. I want them to feel that they can message me or talk to me about it. Yeah, but they're I have my plan, so I know what I'm going to be posting about each day. But again, very often is as soon as I put something in, somebody will ask a question, whether it's privately or on there, about a different product. So you kind of have to be prepared to roll with it as well. There was one party in particular I started on a Friday night, and by the end of the night, I'd done nearly all the products. I was like, what am I going to do for the next 5 days? But it's how they wanted it to be. So it
Yeah,
worked for
I
them.
think that's a really good point. Is you could have, like you said, 5 parties running at exactly the same time. Doesn't mean, and you could be sharing the exact same content into every single one of them, and that doesn't mean you're going to get the same response every
No,
single time. You're
no.
going to, each audience as such is going to want or engage in a different way. I mean, have you had parties that you have had quite minimum interaction on, but still had sales through?
Well, I do try and get as minimal interaction as possible. I think Cara did a video on anonymous engagement, and it's worked wonders for my parties because I don't put anything at all now that needs any interaction, because if nobody interacts, it does look like it's just a complete flop. Whereas if they think there's lots going on behind the scenes, then they're still interested, and it's definitely the best thing to do. I mean, the
Yeah.
games are brilliant, and I think they are fun to play, but I don't think that's the right place for them, not for my parties anyway.
Yeah, no, I would say I agree with you. I don't do I don't do games as such in my online parties experiences. I particularly found the video on anonymous engagement really handy, because I think we all have this pressure on, we all put this pressure on ourselves, not each other, on ourselves, of like, oh my gosh, I've got to get some comments, I've got to get some likes, I've got to get this. So you kind of get really desperate, and that's when you come across as desperate, because you're desperately wanting that interaction. And there is, I mean, I get added to many parties from our presenters and other teams as well. I think I just slip through the net, I just end up in them. And it's almost painful and cringeworthy sometimes when you can see, and you can almost see the desperation in some of these people's posts of seeking that acknowledgement of a like or a comment. And it's painful. Post after post, they're wanting it, and no one is doing it. And I think again it comes back to a little bit of being British. Nobody wants to be the first person to do anything. We're quite reserved. And nobody wants to be out there, especially if you're in, say, your friend Sue's party, but you don't know any of Sue's other friends. There is no way you're going to be the first person commenting in that party.
No, that's right. I mean, I'll get people that will message me quite soon on, but you won't see them at all in that party. You wouldn't even know they were there. And again, I get that. I'd be the same. I wouldn't want to be out there in
So I think that's a really positive thing, that you so you've had parties that on the surface has had very minimal engagement, but that doesn't mean they haven't had orders. So
and what I try and do,
go on.
Because I try and throughout the to do different things with makeup as well. So some of my videos where I'm showing off one of our products, I say this can work for anyone. The white liner is one of my big ones because I love my white liner. So I say, if you've got a white liner, you can do this with yours. So it kind of it keeps people's interest that might not even be buying the products, but by the end they'll think, well, I want your white liner now. Does that make sense? So whilst it was more just a useful tip for them, by the end they're thinking, well, I'll get yours.
Yeah, I agree. I do quite a lot of that in my personal customer group. I do quite a lot what I call tip sharing rather than product selling. It comes back to, like, again, if you've watched Cara's training, a lot of it comes back to that trust element, doesn't it? Especially if you're being put in front of a bunch of strangers, they need to trust that you're not going to fleece them for every penny they've got and make them buy stuff that they don't need. Your role, I think it comes back to, what do we see our roles as? Our roles are to share what we love and why, and also give them something to feel good about. Like, say, if they've got a white liner at home and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I didn't know I could do that, but then the key is by you then going, oh look, but it's on my hand and it's not smudging. They've got theirs on their hand, and all of a sudden theirs is smudging. they're going to want your eyeliner, aren't they? But you've not sold that to them. You've shared with them. And I think that's a huge thing that people miss, is that they think it's about just posting a graphic and saying, oh, white eyeliner, £12. Ask me how to get it.
What I tend to do as well, I think what we all need to do perhaps is forget the sales. Forget that you're trying to get sales from the parties, because again, say like you say, you put too much pressure on yourself and it comes across as salesy. If you see the party yourself as less of a sales event and more of a look at this new audience I can share Younique with, and see it like that, it comes across in everything, and they're more likely to be interested, maybe not now, but in the future. So I think sales to me is the lowest priority on my list for my parties. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I am pretty much the same, and it's you know, sales, contacts, networking. You know, if you I mean, I sort of say towards the end of my parties, if anyone wants to add me as a friend, they can do. I can add them into my customer group if they want to continue to see things, and that tends to get quite a good response, because they've now they trust me a little bit to know that I'm not just going to post a ton of graphics on them.
Yeah.
And some people have taken. I've had people that have been sat in my customer group for a couple of months, maybe even longer sometimes, never interacted, never said a word to me, and then bam, all of a sudden they want something, and they'll message me. And the difference is, because I've not harassed them into that order, they feel comfortable enough to message me and say, oh, you know, I've been thinking about, or could you help me find the right colour for? Whereas I am pretty much sure if I just spammed a whole 2 months worth of graphic.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So I think parties is a great way for building relationships with people. You know, if you get sales, then that's an absolute bonus, obviously.
Yeah.
And obviously that means the hostess gets cash and that too. But I think, you know, with regards to the hostess, I mean, how much interaction do you put on them? You know, what do you ask them to do?
Okay, so most of the time, I leave them alone for the first couple of days, don't ask anything from them. But you tend to find the ones that are really into the parties will do it without you having to ask. The ones that you've almost had to twist their arms to have a party won't do it even if you ask. So, you know, it does very much depend on the hostess. Some of the best parties are the ones that have got most hostess interaction, that will comment, that will put pictures up, because they trust them.
Yeah.
So they're more likely, as soon as she gets involved, they think, oh, I'm going to speak to her, and then they'll speak to me through her, if that makes sense. So they'll put a comment on perhaps a picture she's put on, I'll then comment, and then we're talking.
Yeah.
So it really, really helps to have hostess interaction, but it's not. What I would say is, don't go out there to try and get that, because if they don't want to do it, they won't do it. So you can't rely on that, but
Yeah.
it is good to try and encourage it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that's really good. So I think it'll be really reassuring for people to know, like, so, you know, out of the parties you've done, you know, have you had parties that haven't had any sales whatsoever?
Loads of them. I would say last week I did 5 parties, and 2 of them didn't get any sales at all.
Okay, so in the beginning, go on.
But again, they come over to my customer group, and then they're more likely to be better loyal customers than had they placed an order for a mascara in that party. So I had a party at the beginning of this year, end of last year. What year are we on? That didn't have a single order, but I would say about 3 or 4 people came in to my customer group, and they've all bought from me since. So
and
it is about
loyal to you.
Yeah, and that's why I think if you have fun with the party and they have fun, and you forget the sales, you're actually going to end up with more sales in the long run. It's not a quick thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point, that it's okay. I mean, like, when you first started doing them online, and you would have one that had no sales. I mean, how did that make you personally?
Oh, it's horrible. At the beginning, you feel like you're doing something wrong because you put everything into it and you go into it, particularly your first few, you go in so excited and think, oh, this is it. This is where it's all going to start happening for me. And you put all this in, and every day you just get a bit more flatter and flatter and flatter. And then at the end, you think, well, that was a waste of time. But you can't think like that. I'd probably stopped for a couple of weeks because I thought, I can't do this. And parties aren't for me. And then somebody must have done one that worked, and I thought, no, I'm going to try again. And you've just got to keep trying. And
I
actually,
think it's really good to know that everyone's the same.
yeah, and it's not necessarily you either. It might be that they haven't got the money at the time, or it's just bad timing for them. It doesn't mean that they didn't enjoy it, that you're still in their mind. Does that make sense? So if you've gone in there, they liked you. One day, the chances are they'll turn into a customer. But it is hard not to take it personally because you put so much of yourself into it.
I think especially when you're being yourself, it's almost like part of your soul is in them videos.
Really
and then
is.
To almost be ignored is really hard. And I think that's where I think it's really handy to know that everybody feels exactly the same. And I wouldn't be able to tell you one single person that I know that hasn't had one flop party as such.
Yeah.
And I just think that in itself, what warrants a flop party? Now, for me, to not make any contacts, to not have, that's a flop party. But if you can have contacts, you can have fun, you can get some feedback maybe on your videos. What did people like? What didn't they like? I think it's really, really beneficial as well. I mean, what would you, if you've got, say you're doing a 5-day party and you'd got to day 4 and you hadn't maybe had any sales, is there anything you add in to kind of perk it up a little bit?
Yeah, so what I tend to do in the last day is we'll play a game. No, it's not a game because that makes it sound like a party again, but I'll pop a video in and it's and a picture, and it's basically name your price. So I'll say, right, you tell me which product you've been interested in, then I'll let you know how much it is, and then you let me know how much you want to pay. And you'll be amazed at how little I've had to knock off any products from it, but they still feel like they're getting a bargain. And I know we all love spending our YCash on ourselves, but in my opinion, it's really, really important to try and keep just a little bit back for customers, because that can be the difference of you actually getting that sale or not. So there was concealer back in September, I think it was. Everybody wanted the concealer, and they said £20. So you're really not talking an awful lot. That they're not going to be cheeky. Again, we're English, so we don't like to be too cheeky with things.
Like, I'll pay a £5.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I had one of those.
And I think it's important to remember you can say no. I mean, there's a similar.
Work back up again.
Yeah, there's a similar game as such that Melissa actually. It's one of the first posts I saw Melissa do when I first was interested in Younique. And called Deal or No Deal, and I think it's a very similar thing. So somebody would choose a box number, you send them a deal, they say deal or no deal, and you can kind of negotiate. It's that same sort of principle, like you're saying, okay, so what do you want? And I think I mean I've never done that, but I think that is something I may start doing, because I think, to be fair, a pound off is nothing to us, but it might make them feel loads more better, and they're the people that are probably more likely to go on to say, yeah, I'll have an experience for you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well is, even if they don't accept it, so they go ridiculous and then they don't accept it, you still know what that person wants, so you can use that later. You can perhaps message them and say, hey, you asked about this, how about we do you an experience? And you can hope to get so it's a good way to kind of get some interaction with somebody as well. So there are a few different ways to it, but I do think having just a tiny bit of YCash all the time is really, in my opinion, it's probably what's been the difference between things being successful for me or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard when you're first starting and you might not have YCash. Obviously, you're not, you're probably not going to be able to be as giving as such on some things, but I think, even that offer of, if you bought something, if you're interested in that, how about I give you 10% off your next order or something.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
There's
so that
always
you're building for the future kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's always something you can do, and I think we all love a bargain. We all love something off, don't we? No matter what it is. And like I said, the amount of I've had to actually give away is so minimal that it does make it worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think it's you know, it's good. It's that trust building element. And also, you know, I think because we do have the monthly kudoses, you know, they change every month. So, you know, what is on offer one month might not be the same as these. So things like last month when we had the eyelash curlers, you know, was a huge bargaining tool almost, because you could say, well, if you know, you bought that, you get them as well. You know, so I think it's really important to really make sure each month you tune into what the kudos is and utilize that within your current running parties. Okay, is there anything else you have as a tip, a hint?
Well, okay, when I first started, I thought all of my friends would have parties and all of them would become customers. And that is the one thing that surprised me the most in this whole business, is that they didn't.
No.
And they still don't. And I can't understand it, but there we go. So I sell to more people now that I don't know than those that I do. So I think the thing is, if your friends and family aren't overly supportive, look elsewhere. There are ways of getting parties. Look at anybody you speak to. The more people you speak to about Younique, the more opportunities there are. I know it's said all the time, but I don't think we really take it in properly. I know I didn't. I thought I did my list of 100, but I hadn't, not properly. And I think it is, if you haven't exhausted that, then you've got to keep going and keep going and keep going. And the scary ones, you have to do the scary ones.
The scary.
I don't like the scaries.
Nobody likes the scaries.
No, I know. But you feel good when you've done them.
Yeah, and I think it is important to, you know, just to keep into mindset that, you know, it is about, it's like we said about being prepared and organised for your parties. It's also being prepared and organised before you start messaging people. So having them lists of what, you know, who you're going to message when. Thinking ahead and knowing that this is kind of like, you're not going to start on a Monday and by Wednesday you're going to have 60 million amazing parties and you're going to be a black status, you know.
You build up.
Yeah, it's keeping it into expectations. So I think that the expectations, if you're starting to think about, I'm going to do some parties, is that your friends and family are probably not going to be too supportive of them. They're going to have ones that have no sales, and that's okay. That you're going to feel like poop when that happens, and that's okay. You've all been there. And to just keep going and to tweak and roll and adapt. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to keep adapting as well as you go. You know, what works on a 1 week in January may not be the same video setup as what works in July. You know, is to keep evolving your videos, like you said, kind of mixing it up, because I think otherwise it would get kind of boring for yourself as well. So just keeping it a bit fresh, and you know, and that's where I think the team support will come in really handy, is to, you know, let's start sharing some of the ideas of video ideas or ideas for topics or themes, or, you know, I don't know, things like that, just so that, you know, because what sparks in one person's mind will plant a seed in somebody else's mind, and then, you know, and there's nothing wrong with sharing an odd video from somebody else's party as well. So I think if we can, you know, as a whole team unit that we're amazing to be, is to start thinking, okay, so what videos could I make, and then, you know, what works well, feedback from each other, because I think that would be really, really good for everybody.
So just before you go as well, I was just about to say, I always leave my party open for a few days afterwards as well, because you'll be surprised at how many people come after. And then whilst I wait for their goods to arrive, I post little updates in there, because I think one of the most important thing is that once they have ordered off you, they know that they can trust you, because they've just given you their money and they don't know you from anybody. So I post to say, you know, an update, and then a week after I'll post again to say thank you again, and then I stop it. Because I think some people can carry them on for too long because they think there's an audience there, and I don't think that's wise to do.
No, but I think that's part of the follow-up, isn't it? And you know, that's something I think we can, I think will be a really good discussion we can have is how to do various forms of follow-up. But I think that's a nice way to end a party. Again, sort of reassuring them with that trust element is a really important thing. So, okay, I think that's us done for now. We've managed to get through it, which is amazing. So anyone that has any questions, do just ask us. By no means we are claiming to be experts in any of this. We're just wanting to share with you what has worked or hasn't worked in some cases for us, and hopefully enable you to do the same. So we're going to say goodbye.